Get Rich Education is brought to you by Norada Real Estate, Mid-South Homebuyers, and Ridge Lending Group.
Welcome to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, giving you information and ideas on the investment that has turned more ordinary people into millionaires and billionaires than anything else, and can provide you with more wealth and happiness than you ever thought possible. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, and educator, Keith Weinhold.
You are inside Get Rich Education, episode 157. Hi, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, and I've got a question for you. What if you owned income property that always had 100% occupancy, and your tenant could never damage the property, and it provided steadier cash flows than anything that you've ever invested in previously, and it was positioned to appreciate at the same time, and it provided you with a low cost of entry to get into the investment? Well, you actually can have all of that. I was on the ground in the small Central American nation of Belize last month to explore this exact investment that I'm describing. And Belize it's not like you're traveling to the moon or something. It's just a 2-hour flight from either Houston or Miami. The trip was to explore investing in cacao, the base product for chocolate. Cacao comes from a pod that grows on these kind of skinny trees. So we're going to talk about how this company, the Belize Cacao Consortium, or BCC, they bring new professional expertise into this part of the world where cacao harvesting has taken place for, centuries or longer. But see, in this region, they didn't really have the type of knowledge previously to efficiently cultivate, market, and sell high-end cacao that's used to make this dark chocolate and other products where you can command a premium for that across world markets. Now, importantly, the founder of BCC in Belize, David Sewell, he is the same trusted individual that's been offering coffee farm parcels to investors in Panama for over 3 years now. And I have invested with these companies myself, and I'm going to tell you more about why I have. In fact, just a few minutes before the show began today, I drank coffee from their operation in Panama from my own parcels. But today we're focusing on how you can invest in cacao farm parcels in Belize, 1/2 acre at a time. So this is about investing in cash flowing real estate, but with a twist. None other than the renowned investor Jim Rogers, one of the world's best known and most quoted economists and investors, he said agriculture is going to be the next big thing over the next 20 years. Just think about it. Food, shelter, and safety. Humans need calories. World supply versus demand fundamentals look great for agriculture, and even more so on these higher end, finer flavored grades like we're talking about today. Now, I don't purport to be any sort of food industry expert myself, but you've seen it with your own eyes over the last couple of decades, how we have more Americans kind of migrating away from fast food and really this growing disdain for fake things or things like food that are grown in laboratories, and people embracing to a greater degree more of these health conscious choices and words like fresh and raw and organic. Those words just have a greater emphasis than they used to. Now, with products like coffee or cacao, I like those too because your perishability risk is mitigated. Think about if we were dealing with produce like lettuce or bananas. Well, if there's a disruption in transportation of those things, lettuce and bananas can rot pretty quickly, and it can also drop and bruise pretty easily. Well, these kind of risks, they're things that you almost don't have to deal with at all in coffee or cacao. So you actually have an opportunity to own parcels of land individually deeded to you, and you receive cash annually from the harvest and sale, and you would have a hard asset both outside the U.S. and completely uncorrelated. I mean, virtually completely uncorrelated with what happens in the U.S. or the Canadian stock market or bond market, real estate market, gold market, or what's going on with the Fed's interest rate policy. I just find this really fascinating stuff, so let's chat about it some more with our guest. Today's guest is the founder and managing director of the Belize Cacao Consortium in the Central American nation of Belize. He's also the founder of Panama-based International Coffee Farms, and he's the broker and owner of a RE/MAX real estate agency in the area. He has a just remarkably extensive business background with a focus on cash-flowing agricultural real estate in the region. He's a Canadian citizen, though he and his lovely wife, Deborah, have resided in Latin America for decades. And just personally, he is whom I have been investing with for cash-flowing agriculture myself for 3 years now, and his companies have met or exceeded really every expectation that I've had. Welcome back to Get Rich Education once again, David Sewell.
Thank you, Keith. It's a pleasure to be here again with you.
Well, David, before we discuss kind of the details of this and we get into the rates of return later, basically, what you do is you offer investors individually deeded parcels of cacao trees in Belize, 1/2 acre at a time. And what makes this investment different from a lot of agricultural investments is the low cost of entry, $24,500 for each 1/2 acre parcel. And an investor can buy as few as one, or you've had investors that have bought dozens. There aren't any loans for this. Typically, they're funded with cash, or often Americans can use IRA funds. And cash flow incomes generated annually for the investor from the harvest and the sale of cacao beans and kind of the value-added products from the cacao beans, cacao being that base product for chocolate. Does that pretty much sum it up?
Very, very accurate. As a result of you just being on the most recent tour, you have it aced, Keith.
Yeah, that's right. I was an attendee on the recent cacao tour there in the Toledo district of southernmost Belize. And importantly, these parcels are professionally managed. So it's turnkey farming operations, and the bean processing and trading, the chocolate manufacturing, the sales, that's something that's all done for you. Now, on the tour that I attended with you and the other tour goers a few weeks ago there in the Toledo district of southern Belize where the cacao is grown, we really saw just about everything from seed to bar. So starting at seed in the actual cacao tree nursery to where that seed's nursed to a sapling, and then where those saplings are taken out into the cacao fields where it grows into a tree that creates this cacao pod. And then we went on to your processing and fermenting facility, and finally all the way to the production of a bar where we were actually with the chocolatier and created a bar ourselves. So yeah, I'm sure as any other tour goer can attest, as a longtime Alaskan in Belize, I was quite sweaty on that tour. I usually wanted to change my shirt by 9 a.m. every morning, but it really was a lovely tour, David. So I think just backing up here, just to sort of start from the beginning, I think we can get a better understanding of the investment if we know what you saw in it yourself for the cacao production in Belize. So why cacao and why Belize?
Why Belize first? Belize has had a long reputation as a grower of very high quality, known in the industry as fine flavor cacao. They do that very well. The hot and sweaty conditions that the farm workers put up with all day long, every day, is ideal for growing cacao. And they have been doing it for centuries as Mayans. They have perfected the technology of growing cacao on a basic level, let me say, but they have not been able to advance beyond what cultural norms would suggest to them as the correct way to run a cacao plantation. The application of capital and the application of we would call the art of cacao science, same as we do in coffee in Panama, allows us to be able to generate better cacao in quality, more cacao in quantity, and a much better return on the labor of the local people for themselves. We identified Belize as an underperforming asset, if you want, in its entirety. It's not an easy country to do business in, but once you're in the country and doing business, and you've jumped over some of the hurdles that are in place, it is a very great opportunity for us and for all of our parcel owners to be involved in floating all the boats that are in Belize. And trust me, and you've seen, they do need their boats floated with additional capital and management science, management know-how to take them to the next level. They have extremely good quality cacao, just not enough of it. The demand for the cacao in Belize alone for fine flavor, quote-unquote, specialty cacao, the high-end cacao that's not the commercial quality cacao grown in the Ivory Coast and parts of Africa that are sold commercially. This is high-end specialty cacao. Fine flavor is the definition. sold at very high premium prices. The opportunity to develop that business is huge. They are at the position now where they are approximately meeting less than 20% of the demand for their cacao just nationally. You add on top of that the demand for their cacao internationally from chocolate makers around the world who do understand the quality of the bean comes from Belize, but in too small a quantity. The demand is huge externally for their cacao, and they are, again, only meeting 15 or 20% of that demand. So combine the two, opportunity knocks, and it's right in front of our faces. So why Belize and why cacao?
The world has less and less arable land all the time. At the same time, the world population is growing and there are more and more mouths to feed. And within a lot of those populations that continue to develop and quote-unquote westernize, a lot of them are developing tastes for finer flavored things. So we're not talking about your kind of milk chocolate manufactured by Hershey's. We're talking about finer flavored chocolate, often darker chocolate that has a higher cacao content. And that's the sort of market that we're catering to that typically has faster year-over-year consumptive growth than it does for maybe those lower-end products or milk chocolate products. Basically in Belize, I think what I'm seeing is you're basically identifying and exploiting a knowledge arbitrage there. You're finding farms that are for sale that have never had things like a professional agronomist or a professional college-educated soil scientist that goes ahead and comes in there and knows how to operate a farm efficiently to its best and highest use.
That's exactly right. The art of coffee or cacao science is very critical with the addition of capital. And those professionals are available on our team here in Panama for coffee and cacao, remarkably similar. Our general manager here in Panama, Andres Lopez, has been instrumental in adjusting, if you want to call it that, the methodology that the Mayan farmers have used for many, many centuries to grow cacao, to contemplate just what you said, the agronomy, soil science, the management science of building a farm from scratch that makes sense ecologically, environmentally, and economically. Frankly, they did not have that skill that we are in the process of changing and turning around.
Yeah, and part of the process of changing and turning around, when you've gone ahead and identified a farm that you can purchase, is that oftentimes those farms are farmed by those indigenous peoples, oftentimes the Mayan natives, and those people and that land in the history of the earth has never had professional agronomy or soil science applied to it. So that's kind of that knowledge arbitrage. But one thing that you do importantly when you come in and purchase a farm is you don't fire the workers, you retrain the workers.
Yes, we do. Anybody that wants to is more than welcome to join our team, particularly if they have expertise, local expertise on the particular farm we're acquiring. It's very valuable to us to bring that together with them. That goes along with the environmental and economic sustainability, which are very important, of course, but socially sustainable operations are most important to us. And we are very heavily focused on making sure that we are providing the right opportunity for the people that are already in the business and have been for all their lives, and frankly, depend mainly on their cacao production to eat on a regular basis. It's not very much money, and we have a program in place that will help them once we acquire the farm to enjoy the capital that we can make available in the form of a socially sustainable program that provides higher wages or even wages at all that they might not have received before, plus social security benefits and medical benefits, education benefits, better equipment. In fact, in some cases, just equipment. Slayed me when I first started looking into this a year ago a bit, that access to a machete or to a snipper that would trim branches on a tree was not available to a lot of these people. And we, from the 21st century here in developed countries, are amazed. A $5 machete and a $10 snipper is an increase in the technology for them.
Right. Something we would consider archaic is something that they deem as desirable and don't even have. And that's one of the things that you're doing with the investor money. So what you do as the Belize Cacao Consortium is you go in and you identify perhaps underperforming parcels or an existing underperforming farm, and then it's the investor capital that's used to bring in that professionalism and to bring in that equipment as well But, really, David, from sort of the genesis of this is, why are these farms for sale in the first place? How do you have an opportunity to buy them?
In some cases, to what we have experienced over the last 4 years in Panama in the coffee business, is the farmer is generally getting considerably older. We're talking 80s and higher. They've been in the business or been in the tradition of growing cacao and feeding their families from some of that production for a long, long period of time. But as the kids got older and grew up, most of them don't have an interest in digging in the dirt and getting dirty. A few do, but most don't. Most want to live in the city, Belize City. Most want to go to the States and live in the U.S. Some are pursuing higher education. Some are just pursuing other jobs that aren't as menial as pruning a cacao farm 7 days a week from dawn till dusk in 90-degree temperatures and 90% humidity. It's grueling work. And as you said, your T-shirt's done by 9 o'clock in the morning, and they don't even wear T-shirts. So the kids are not interested anymore. The parents have nobody to send the farm down to, time to sell it off to somebody else and distribute the capital amongst the family. And that seems to be what's happening mainly.
Now, with what you're doing over there in Panama, you have a similar model with the coffee farm parcels. Sometimes you buy parcels that are already an existing operating underperforming farm, and then there are times where you buy parcels where it's just raw land where you just plant anew. Now, in Belize with the cacao, what are you doing there? Are you buying an existing farm that needs to be rehabilitated to a better and higher use every time? Are you planting raw land parcels anew, or both? What are you doing there?
The vast majority of it is raw land that will be planted new to build a 21st century designed cacao plantation. We bought one farm that had 31 acres in the farm in total, and 4 of the parcels were in cacao and the rest was not. But vast majority of our operations will be planting new farms, new plantations, taking advantage of the soil technology and the management science necessary to build a proper cacao plantation. To that end, you were at the nursery and you saw 100,000 seedlings growing all at one time. Quite an impressive operation that the Maya people have put together for us. And in 8 months or so, we've grafted, grown, planted, and are now enjoying the growth of 80,000 saplings in these new farms that we acquired this year. And we'll continue on with that nursery program, and we'll continue on with the acquisition program, and we'll keep growing saplings in our nursery and putting them into new farms, taking into account 21st century technology.
So as far as an investor interest, that is a good thing that you've got some growth taking place in the nursery, because that way when an investor closes on parcels, those plants already sort of have a head start, and an investor can get their first return earlier because those plants are that much closer to maturing and going ahead and bearing the cacao fruit.
Yes, that's true. The cacao fruit will stay. It will take about 2.5 years from the time you take it out of the nursery as a grafted sapling, and maybe an additional 6 months as a non-grafted sapling. But within 3 years, the trees will be producing their first pods.
Well, I want to ask David some more things. David has a business model founded on 3 pillars of sustainability. What are some risks? What are some downsides of this investment? And what's the cash flow and the ROI actually look like? You're listening to Get Rich Education. Our guest is the Belize Cacao Consortium's David Sewell. More when we come back. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Cash flow real estate investors, if you're looking for a mortgage loan with a company that specializes in investment property loans, it's Ridge Lending Group. They provide income property loans in almost every U.S. state. Ridge has worked with tens of thousands of investors and homeowners all over the country. In fact, with ethics and transparency, they've helped more people realize their dreams through real estate investing than any other mortgage lender in the country. Get started at ridgelendinggroup.com.
This is Get Rich Education's business developer, John Collins, and you're listening to Get Rich Education with my friend, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education with our guest, David Sewell of the Belize Cacao Consortium, where there's really an interesting investment offered here, going ahead and receiving cash flow on an annual basis from the harvest of cacao beans, something completely uncorrelated with the United States housing market, with the United States interest rates, with the United States stock market. Stocks go up, stocks go down. Your renter might move out in the middle of the night, but you know what? The cacao trees keep showing up every day. They're quiet. They don't make complaints. They don't vacate, and they just keep producing. So it really is, in a sense, a pretty safe investment. But before we talk about safety and risk, David, you sort of have three pillars of sustainability that your business model is founded upon. And you already started touching upon the socially sustainable one, how you make conditions better for farmers and the workers and their families. Talk about the three pillars.
Very important to us to be a balanced company. Like, imagine a coffee table with one leg. Pretty hard to be stable. Two legs doesn't do very much either. Three legs gives you some stability. And those three legs for us are economic sustainability. We have to make money or we can't stay here. The whole program is designed to be economically sustainable for a legacy investment. As a matter of fact, you could and should probably own these parcels forever. There can't be much of a reason to sell them once you start to understand the long-term passive cash flow and the amounts that can be generated. So the economic sustainability has to be built in first so we can do what we're going to do, fill our promises to our investors. And more importantly, but equally as important, fill our promises to our people that work for us all day long, every day in those sweaty, hot conditions, producing the products that we turn into amazing chocolate and sell internationally for a profit. Economic sustainability. The social sustainability is built into that, and we've talked a little bit about it, but it's extremely important, such that to the point of 20% of the gross profits of the operations is allocated to a socially sustainable pool, which is inviolate. We use that pool exclusively to make the lives of people who perform for us better, and the people who are attached and associated to them, not just their families, but we also help vendors and suppliers that would be providing product and supplies to us. We deal with them on very favorable terms to be able to be sure that they're supported properly and that they're around in the future to continue to do business with us. It's a wide-ranging program. Somewhere in the order of 80 people now are enjoying the benefits, if you want to say, of the social sustainability program in our combined businesses in coffee and cacao. I don't know what kind of a multiplier you would put on that, but 5 times or 10 times we touch that many people. So there could be 500, 800 people that we were touching that otherwise wouldn't be touched if we didn't have this program and if the owners didn't buy the parcels, supply the capital, and we didn't manage the capital and provide the turnkey operations and build the business. So it's a team, a very big team. Economically viable, socially sustainable, and environmentally sustainable as well. We do not do anything that will harm the environment. It will be better off when we leave it. If we ever leave it, then we found it. To that end, we built a large beneficio or processing mill in Panama for coffee, for example, that is very, very, very state-of-the-art and very environmentally sustainable. And I invite anybody that wants to come and see it to see it. In Belize, we built a cacao processing depot, which ferments the cacao. That's part of another discussion, and dries the cacao. But it is also very environmentally friendly, and we don't do any damage. Everything's grown in Belize on an organic basis, so it's very friendly to the environment. Those three pieces together make up the support system for the company.
3 pillars of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. The economic is good for us as investors, and you need to stay in business. The social is good for the people and the workers, and then the environmental, being responsible to the earth. So that's really well thought out. But with any investment, there are certain risks and certain downsides, and I'm quick to remind myself that even cash in a savings account has certain risks called inflation and risks called opportunity cost. What are some risks or some downsides there with investing in cacao parcels in Belize?
You can break it into various segments. The farming side is subject to pestilence and some sorts of rust and other kinds of fungus and things like that grow in these hot and humid environments. You need to manage the heat and the humidity and the airflow such that you don't destroy the environmental conditions or don't remove the environmental conditions that are necessary to grow this fine flavor cacao. But you also need to be able to mitigate those risks. And it's quite simple, actually. Pruning your tree and cleaning the ground underneath your tree is about 90% of the battle. Like I said, it's organically grown, mostly by default, as an example, because the people there can't afford to put anything on their plants or on their trees, so they don't do it because they can't afford to buy it. So therefore, by definition, it's organic because there is no other choice. But what we've discovered is that there's not enough effort being put into the mitigation, so they're not pruning enough, they're not cleaning the ground enough, and they're not looking after the trees well enough so that if you do the pruning and do the cleaning, the air can circulate, sun can shine, breezes can blow, and the trees can flourish without any risks from the standard fungus or other insects and things that are damaging. Now, insects are very important, so you can't just eliminate all the insects, because the insects are very important for all kinds of biological reasons, including fertilizing the trees and everything else that goes along with the natural process of growth. The symbiotic relationship between all of these things, sun, wind, rain, insects, etc., are all important, and they all have to be managed. We can mitigate the risks in the farming side quite a lot. We also can mitigate the risks in the farming side by buying the right property. And the right property includes drainage, soil conditions. Cacao likes a lot of water, but they don't like their feet to be wet, and they don't want to stand in that water all day long. We need really good drainage, so the soil part and the elevation and the layout of the property is extremely important. So we've walked an awful lot of farms up to our tops of our rubber boots in mud that's like peanut butter, stomping around trying to find proper drainage, proper farms. And we've come across the ones we've bought, and they're working fine. So that farming side is somewhat manageable and easily mitigated. It is very manageable and easily mitigated. That would be a risk to consider in the farming side. The other sides of the company, we have 3 revenue streams that are available in this opportunity. The second revenue stream is part of a trading operation where we buy wet beans from other farmers to support them in their lifestyle so that they're fellow farmers with us, and we will buy their beans, ferment and dry, and sell their beans, and we pay them a higher premium as well. The risk there is the farmers are poor, and they see somebody that's coming along that has a nice truck and it's cash, and they're ready to buy their beans, and they have a tendency to, from time to time, maybe add a little water to the bucket because you buy it by weight. So it's not a big risk, but it's something that the local people know that they do, and they know they're doing it. And so you end up taking the bucket and pouring some of the water out and then weighing the bucket and paying them for the beans and not for the water and little things like that. But that's all local boots on the ground know-how. Wouldn't call it much of a risk. It's kind of a funny story, but that's part and parcel of buying and processing beans. There's risk in fermenting because you have to do it right. And we have expert fermenters, know their business, and we have provided the capital that they didn't have to be able to put the equipment together such that they can manipulate these beans during the fermentation process to create a very, very high quality, fine flavor cacao. And you saw that as an example at the depot. Drying the beans is also another issue. Storing the beans properly is another issue. The bags have to be done correctly. The bags are not cheap. To put them in properly, an indigenous farmer would use an old flour sack, store it in the back of his house, not properly stored, not environmentally controlled, not in the proper storage conditions, bags, etc. They don't have the money to spend $3 on a bag just to store some beans. All those things go into making the business work. It's all boots on the ground know-how. It doesn't eliminate risk, but it certainly seriously mitigates it.
Yeah, I mean, being an investor myself, I looked at both sides, including risks, and I deemed the risk to be relatively low. I mean, Belize and the southern Belizean mainland there is not in any sort of hurricane alley, although they certainly can hit there from time to time. And yeah, when you talk about the pestilence, well, that's part of training the farmers. First of all, giving them a machete where they may not even been able to afford one in the first place. And I stood there with one of the laborers in the fields and watched him go ahead and cut branches in order to facilitate that flow of air so that there isn't any fungus in there. And that same laborer let me know that he didn't always believe in doing that. He thought that was bad to go ahead and reduce foliage. So that's just one application of the example of bringing in professional agronomy and bringing in a professional soil scientist and going ahead and getting that knowledge arbitrage and getting those people on board to help reduce the risk of fungus.
We could tell them a good story that you and I experienced when he told us that what he learned from his father was that you cut off your foot before you cut off a branch on my tree.
That's absolutely right, yeah. But I think that's since been debunked for that particular farmer. What about government stability? How's the risk deemed there?
Government's stable there. It's a small country. It's only 360,000 people. A small city spread over a big area and very, very tightly knit. It's amazing how many people in our team know everybody else in town. So there's a very tightly knit community. The government is, in my opinion, a little overbearing. they have not got to the point where they've realized that private enterprise is a whole lot better than government monopoly. So the government pretty well runs everything, and you can imagine how that works out. I don't have any problem with them. We deal with them the way we have to. We comply with what we have to do. We fill out the forms. We get to put the signatures in the right place. We do the environmental impact studies. It's slower than it should be, but it's slower in most Latin American countries, most South American countries too. So you get used to it. You deal with it. I don't find them a big problem. Banking there is an issue. They have trouble with correspondent banking and keeping their relationships up, largely as a result of the United States pressure on FATCA and FBAR regulations and all kinds of other things that have been problematical for foreign countries and foreign banks to comply with. That's difficult. It's difficult here in Panama as well. Needs to be overcome, has been overcome. We deal with it all the time. It's a matter of doing business. So they have a central bank there. Central bank's a bit of an issue. They need to approve everything, and I mean everything. The fact that they are in the way or in the middle, they don't add a lot of value, but they take a lot of time. So you have to be able to be prepared to get stuff done properly, the way they want it, in time, in front of them, and make sure you have your business affairs organized, because it'll be a little slower. But those things are all interesting. They're hurdles that are in the way, but they're once hurdled, we're on the other side. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a significant barrier to entry for a lot of people who just aren't interested in jumping over those hurdles. We're there, we're established, we're growing fast. And because we have the people that are there necessary to do the job, and we also have the institutions in place, and we have the people that are important in those institutions behind us, because they realize that we're a real entity with real opportunity to affect social change in the country. And we're about doing that.
We've talked about how this benefits the farmer and the local economy. We've talked about how we leave the environment as good or better than how we found it. What about WIIFM, the what's in it for me, the investor? Let's talk about cash flow and income, and the fact that I really believe that the cash flow from these agricultural investments is more predictable than that from income property. Unlike your fourplex that you might own in Columbus, Ohio, well, those tenants that you serve and the places that that income comes from, that's a direct result of the economic vibrancy of what's going on in Columbus, Ohio. But here, when you're growing cacao beans, you have multiple revenue sources, and really, ostensibly, your customer is the entire world. You're serving that entire world and that world demand of cacao, not just in one local market. So I really see it as being more predictable than that from classic income property.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Our tenants are trees. So like you said, they don't get up in the middle of the night, take your furniture and move out. They're dependable. They're every day. We do know what they're capable of in the past, and we are quite sure what they're capable of in the future, so that the forecasting can be quite accurate. We don't have any significant issues with respect to the market. The market in the national area is very low in supply and high in demand, and the same goes internationally. So your comment is perfectly correct, that the world is our oyster. We have the ability to shift markets or shift products internationally depending on what's going on. So with the predictability of the agriculture, with the availability of land at the right pricing so that we can develop it into proper plantations, with the available of very, very motivated and dedicated labor, with our experience in the socially and economically and environmentally sustainable business and coffee, with the low supply and very high demand for the products both nationally and internationally, ticks off most of the boxes on we might want to call business risk or financial risk.
Yeah, from a supply-demand standpoint, the supply is underserved and the demand is there and it's growing. And yeah, it has a relatively, what I'll call a low beta. The demand just doesn't really change that much. It's on more of a line, more of a straight upward trajectory with fewer sort of wiggles in that demand line there. When an investor goes ahead and funds a parcel, whether they buy 1 half-acre parcel at $24,500 or whether they buy 4 of them or 14 of them, how soon can an investor expect to get their first cash flow, and what rate of return can they expect?
Because we have multiple revenue streams in this opportunity, and they are cacao pods or cacao farming, the actual farming of the pods to grow the beans. There's also a trading company called Belize Cacao Traders that I mentioned briefly before that buys wet beans from farmers that are operating now. And We ferment and dry those and sell those in the international marketplace, revenue stream number 2. And then we have the fully vertically integrated company established so that we have the chocolate making facility in Ambergris Caye and Belize City, where we can turn our cacao pods or our cacao fermented and dried beans or those from the other farmers into fine flavor, artisanal, 5-star handmade chocolate. Revenue streams will start to come sooner than the 3 years that it would normally take if you were only farming, because we can generate revenue in year 1 from trading, and we will be able to generate revenue from year 2 in the chocolate shop. So those other revenue streams combined will give us an opportunity to start providing small revenue streams within 15 to 18 months of acquiring your parcel or parcels. The return on that investment is an internal rate of return, an IRR, or an average annual yield, if you want to call it that, calculated in the normal fashion over a longer period of time, typically in agriculture, a 20 years cash flow model that, when discounted properly to reflect the risk, the business risk, gives you an average annual interest rate, if you really want to call it that. And that return is forecast to be somewhere in the 11 to 13% range. That would be an annual return, but over a 20-year period. So it's an average return.
Okay, and that's an average return based on the cash flow ROI, which does not include any potential appreciation in the land.
In this case, there is a small appreciation in the land. There isn't in Panama in the coffee farm business, but there is a small appreciation built into that forecast in the Belizean opportunity, and those that are interested will be able to see that clearly stated in the financial pro forma.
And then as far as the income generated for the investor, definitely check with your tax professional, but you would not expect to pay Belize tax on your annual income, but United States citizens, they must report and pay tax on their cash flow income. This is an opportunity that's not really for farm flippers. Tell us more about the exit strategy down the road.
What we intend is to build a community of people who are interested in a legacy investment opportunity. In other words, as this grows, quote unquote, and no pun intended, the cash flow is stronger and stronger and stronger every year. The numbers, when you look at them, have double-digit annual returns that are quite significant. And as any sophisticated investor will know, the return on your investment is something that's important when you figure out what you're going to do with something you just sold. So if the sale decision comes along and says, I'm going to sell this, I'm going to get this much money. Then the bigger question is, what am I going to do with the money? Where am I going to get the same return or a better return than I just sold out of? And you'll see the numbers in these opportunities with agriculture as it grows are very significant. So legacy investments, long-term hold orientations, perfect for patient money like IRA money, just absolutely perfect for it is part of our target. You can own the property for a shorter period of time and do what you want. You own it, so it's yours. 3-year minimum hold, and we're just forcing you to do that to stay in long enough to get at least to get the farms producing cacao pods or coffee cherries so that you can get some return on your investment. But it takes time to build these plantations out fully, and 3 years is not long enough, but we're going to force you to stay for 3. But we strongly recommend you consider 5 to 8 or 10 as a minimum, and you really should be thinking about a legacy investment. So we don't want anybody that we call farm flippers. If you're in the business of flipping for a profit in a short period of time, and we define short as something between 5 and 8 years, then this is probably not for you.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not for you either if you want to go ahead and you're thinking about leverage ratios and you're looking at doing cash out refinances and 1031 exchanges. This really isn't the type of investment for that. This is long-term legacy investing where the rate of return on a pro forma basis is typically going to increase year over year as these farms and fields mature. So as time goes on, you would be less likely to want to sell it. In fact, I've said it here on the show before that the agricultural parcels that I own with David's companies is the only real estate that I own anywhere that I never plan on selling. So I really love talking about this stuff. It's so different. It's so counter-cyclical to a lot of the things that are happening in the United States and Canada. And you offer 3 tours per year to people, and those people don't even need to be existing investors. You offer those to existing investors or prospective investors or people that just want to come check it out. Tell us about the tours.
Come on down anytime you want and kick the trees, as we call it. And we have 3 group tours a year. You can come anytime you want if you're in country. in Belize or Panama and you want a tour, you let us know, and we'll take you on a private tour and show you the facilities. But you're not going to have the fun and the camaraderie that we have on a weekend, a 4-day weekend of like-minded individuals, all sharing the same kind of opportunities. They're there to look at the coffee farms. They're there to look at the cacao farms. They're there to understand our business, but they're also there for each other. And the amount of information transfer that goes on in between people that are very like-minded is amazing. And there's lots of little conferences going on here and there and business cards being exchanged and email addresses and everything else, where over the years in coffee, we've had groups of people that are still communicating with each other from their tour 3 years ago. So you can come down. We'll have a 4-day weekend. It's always over a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. You get here and we'll take care of the rest. So you're responsible for your transportation costs in your hotel, everything else, local transportation, local food, drinks, parties, tours, admissions to events, et cetera, our pleasure.
Yeah, so the tour itself is absolutely free. I really might recommend just going to check it out. Maybe it's for you, maybe it isn't. I think the worst thing that could happen is that you'll have a really interesting vacation in a diverse place. So you can check out that at getricheducation.com/events. That's where you can see when the next cacao tours in Belize are taking place, or even the next cash flowing coffee farm parcel tours in Panama there at getricheducation.com/events. I love turnkey residential income property in the United States. That's really the main thing I do. That's become popular. That oftentimes has waiting lists. But this is turnkey agricultural income property. And David, what kind of acreage do you have available? What kind of parcels do you have available right now?
We generally have been sold out of parcels in advance and have taken that waiting list. Lately, we have had some good opportunities presented to us, and we've acquired a bit of a land bank of farms. So we have parcels available now in raw land in Panama in coffee, and of course, raw land in cacao in Belize, because that's virtually all we're doing there. So there are parcels available in both opportunities. You simply would get a hold of us and express your interest in what we're doing by going through our websites or Get Rich Education's information, and we can place you into raw land parcels on a timely basis at the moment.
Well, David, this is very interesting. How can our listeners find out more?
Very simple. Simply go to getricheducation.com/chocolate. That's getricheducation.com/chocolate.
David, well, I absolutely love talking about this stuff. It's so exotic and interesting. Thanks so much for coming back onto the show.
My sincere pleasure. I've enjoyed the other 2 times we've been together. I've very much enjoyed showing you all of our opportunities on both the tours and look forward to a long relationship in the agricultural business.
It's going to be a great run. I expect it to be for decades. Yeah, well, we talked a lot about big picture stuff there, supply versus demand, distribution, social sustainability to the Mayan farmers. I think the thing that strikes you about dealing with David's companies are attributes like professionalism, transparency, and just such great communication over time. As an investor, they send you some really colorful and detailed emails with progress reports on how the crops are coming along and more. Amongst all the big picture things, some of the attention to detail that I notice on these tours are things that others might not think about. Now, on the Panama Coffee Farm tour that I attended with them almost 2 years ago, that was so educational and exotic, but the types of things I noticed on the Belize Cacao field trip included things like, okay, the one morning before us tour goers went out to the cacao fields for the day, we stopped by a storage area to get fitted with rubber boots just in case it got wet underfoot while we were out. Even the rubber overboots have the Belize Cacao Consortium words and logo right there on the side of the boot. So it's just such a professional operation there, literally from head to toe. These companies are also very visible. Today's guest, David Sewell, and the company president, Darren Doyle, will be at the New Orleans Investment Conference the 25th to 28th of this month. I'm going to be there too, and I hope that you're joining us there in New Orleans so that we can all kind of meet each other in just a couple weeks. You can find out about that event at getricheducation.com/events. And at the New Orleans Investment Conference, that's also where you'll see Robert Kiyosaki and Peter Schiff and some other prominent speakers speak. In fact, David Sewell is becoming quite a friend of mine. He and his wife, Deborah, talk about visiting my wife and I here in our hometown of Anchorage next year, so you can get involved in a legacy investment, something that will potentially both benefit you and be a legacy to your heirs at the same time. Grab the colorful free reports that have been put together for you at getricheducation.com/coffee, and then more germane to what we discussed today, getricheducation.com/chocolate. Until we meet again next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
You've been listening to Get Rich Education, telling you what the wealthy won't tell you about real estate and investing.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, getricheducation.com.